Hey, welcome. Today we're digging into a pretty radical new way of thinking about Alzheimer's. What if the whole story isn't really about protein clumps, but about the brain completely running out of gas?
For as long as most of us can remember, the Alzheimer's story has had these two main villains. You've got amyloid plaques, these sticky protein clumps that build up between nerve cells. And then you have tau tangles, which are these twisted up protein fibers that clog up the inside of the cells. The basic idea was, hey, if we can just get rid of this junk, we can solve the problem.
But a whole new wave of science is asking a really powerful question. What if we've been looking at this all wrong? What if those plaques and tangles aren't the cause at all? What if they're just the smoke, and the real fire is a massive energy crisis that's raging deep inside the brain?
To really get this, we first have to appreciate just how much of an energy hog our brain actually is. I mean, its appetite for fuel is absolutely relentless.
Think about that for a second. This little organ, just 2% of your body weight, is burning through a fifth of your entire daily energy budget. It's incredible, and that huge demand makes it super vulnerable. You see, any kind of disruption to its fuel supply isn't a small problem. It's a potential catastrophe for every single thing the brain does.
And this, right here, is the big shift in thinking. Instead of seeing Alzheimer's as just a disease where junk protein piles up, scientists are starting to see it as a bioenergetic failure, a metabolic breakdown. The brain's incredibly complex system for making and using energy is failing, and that is what's causing the cognitive decline.
Okay, so let's get into the weeds a little. To see what's going wrong, we first have to understand how a healthy brain gets its fuel. And it's actually this really elegant partnership between two different kinds of brain cells.
So here's how it's supposed to work. You have these cells called astrocytes. Think of them as the brain's support crew. They grab glucose from your blood and turn it into this super efficient, high-octane fuel called lactate. Then, they shuttle that lactate over to the neurons, the star players, which use it to power everything. Our thoughts, our memories, the whole shebang. It's a beautiful little system.
Right, so that's the healthy brain. So what goes wrong in Alzheimer's? Well, all the new evidence is pointing to a kind of metabolic sabotage, where a really important pathway just gets hijacked.
Let me introduce you to the main suspect in this new story, an enzyme called IDO1. Normally, it's fine, it does its job in the immune system, but when it gets way too active inside those astrocyte support cells, it basically slams the brakes on their ability to make fuel.
And here's where it gets really interesting. This is how the old story connects to the new one. It turns out that it's the amyloid and tau proteins are old culprits that are actually triggering this massive overactivation of IDO1. They're the ones flipping the switch that starts all this metabolic chaos.
So, when IDO1 goes into overdrive, it starts chewing up an amino acid called tryptophan, and it spits out this other compound called kynurenine, or KYN for short. And KYN? Well, KYN is the real saboteur here. High levels of it actively shut down the astrocyte's machinery for processing glucose. It basically just grinds the entire fuel production line to a halt.
So this really lays it all out. In a healthy brain, IDO1 is normal, KYN levels are low, and the astrocytes are just humming along, pumping fuel to happy, functional neurons. But in the Alzheimer's brain, you've got this runaway IDO1 activity, which leads to high KYN levels, which then shuts down fuel production. And the result? The neurons are literally being starved of energy, and that's what leads to the dysfunction and impairment.
But wait, it gets worse. A stalled fuel factory isn't the only problem. There's another huge piece to this energy crisis puzzle, and it's that the cell's own battery is basically going dead.
This brings us to a molecule called NAD+. Now, this stuff is absolutely essential for life. The best way to think about it is like a tiny, rechargeable battery that's inside every single one of our cells. It's the universal energy currency that powers countless critical jobs, from making fuel to repairing our DNA.
And you can see just how vital it is. NAD+ is right at the heart of turning food into energy. It helps keep our DNA stable and repaired. It keeps our mitochondria, the actual power plants of the cell, healthy. And it helps our cells survive when they're under stress. I mean, without enough NAD+, the entire system just grinds to a halt.
And here's the kicker. We now know that in Alzheimer's brains, NAD+ levels are seriously depleted. The cellular batteries are drained. This makes it even harder for the starving cells to produce what little energy they can, and it cripples their ability to repair damage. It's a truly vicious downward spiral.
So if the problem is a stalled fuel factory and a dead battery, well, the path to a solution starts to look a whole lot clearer.
Scientists are now looking at a two-pronged attack to try and reboot the brain's entire energy system.
And this chart lays out the strategy perfectly. First, you release the metabolic brake. You use drugs to block that rogue IDO1 enzyme. This stops that toxic kynurenine from being made and lets the astrocytes start making fuel again. And second, you recharge the cellular battery. You use boosters to get NAD+ levels back up, which restores the cell's core ability to make energy and repair itself.
And the results from this approach in animal studies are just stunning. Get this, restoring the metabolic function led to a profound rescue. Cognitive function actually returned. But here's the really revolutionary part. This happened even when the amyloid plaques and tau tangles were still there. This is huge. It suggests that making the brain's energy system resilient might be way more important than just cleaning up the protein junk.
So obviously, this research is incredibly promising. But what's the path forward? How do we actually get this from the lab into the hands of patients who need it right now?
Well, here are the next steps. Human clinical trials for NAD+ boosters are already underway or being planned, which is great news. And pretty conveniently, IDO1 inhibitor drugs have already been developed to treat cancer, so it might be possible to repurpose them for Alzheimer's. The biggest challenge, as it often is in brain science, is getting these drugs to cross the very protective blood-brain barrier so they can get to where they need to go. Look, this new way of thinking is a total game changer. By shifting the focus away from the debris of the disease and onto the brain's energy engines, science is forging a completely new path forward. A path that isn't just about slowing Alzheimer's down, but about the very real possibility of restoring what's been lost. And that right there offers a tremendous amount of new hope.